Today's Center Reefs Nation podcast was brought to you by Manscaped. Head to manscaped.com and use the promo code capital C, capital L, Nation, and to receive 20% off plus free delivery on all their products. Welcome to today's podcast of Senators Nation. This is Pat LaRusso, and I'll soon be joined by my co-host Anthony Sino, where we'll be discussing the comments made earlier this week by Brandon Shanahan in regards to big hits and fighting in today's NHL. And we also have a special guest in our second segment of today's podcast, where we'll be speaking to Benjamin Davidson, Maple Leafs fan and author of the book Murphy's Boy. So here we are with my co-host Anthony Sino. Welcome back for another week. How has this past week gone for you?
Not too bad, Pat. Thanks for asking. Pretty much the same. Been following a little bit too much U.S. politics for my than I'm used to, really, with no sports on. It's really the only thing that's been on TV all week. But other than that, just watched some Champions League and NFL football. So there's nothing really new for me from an entertainment perspective. But just trying to get a last few golf rounds in before the weather turns.
Excellent. This is definitely the week 4 with plus 16, plus 17.
I know.
For what looks like it's going right into Sunday. So,
exactly.
Let's not complain. Let's not complain with this mild weather while we still have it. As a team, we were laughing offline about, where we're going to get content and what are we going to talk about. And then, bang, it happens this week. Leafs president Brendan Shanahan appears on the Smartless podcast with Will Arnett and a couple other Hollywood celebrities, and they discuss hockey, where it's going. And he made a comment that seems to have rubbed some in Leafs Nation a little the wrong way, where he was discussing how he prefers the big goal over the big hit, and how he respects the way he played the game, but definitely doesn't want to see a player get injured. So now he's even advocating for less stage fighting, where a player could be severely injured. Anthony, I just want to get your quick thoughts on what you thought of those comments, and kind of where you stand. Are you for or against that stance?
Yeah. So overall, I don't really think that Shanahan said anything too controversial to the point that some people on Twitter were making it out to be. And I say that in the sense that, like, people want to. The unfortunate reality is that people still want to preserve the game of hockey to what it was 30 years ago, 25 years ago. And the fact of the matter is that it's just not possible anymore. And it's kind of been just through the types of players that are entering the league, right? And the types of players that are leaving the league. You see guys like, I believe Joe Thornton or Zdeno Chara will be the oldest players in the NHL next year. Like, they're into their early 40s, and you just don't see those types of players and a type of player like Zdeno Chara anymore, right? Like, there's no, and funny enough, a guy like Chara came into the league where he was kind of like just this really tall, skinny guy, never really wanted to hit anybody, and then it wasn't until he joined the league in like the late 90s or early 2000s where his coaches were basically like, look, you need to start fighting and being physically intimidating to people, or else you're not going to play in this league. So I think the expectation from coaches has changed, and avenues to get to the NHL have changed. right? So
Yes.
I just don't think that we're gonna see people that are just strictly making the roster because they're a staged fighter.
Yes.
And it's just like the way that hockey has grown to the point where it favors speed and it favors skill, right? But
Yes.
I'm of the opinion that that's not all hockey is, and I still think that's not all hockey will become. I don't think you're going to get to a point where there's no contact in hockey. So I think I find myself in the middle of this kind of the debate where I very much align with what Shanahan's saying, where the direct quote is, I have it up here, is like people get pissed off. I know people get pissed off at me when I say this, but I don't get excited to see a big hit. I get excited when I see a big goal. He doesn't want to see anybody get carried off on a stretcher, like you said. But then he goes on to say, if I see a fight in hockey and it's because someone was protecting somebody or somebody was bullying somebody and you're addressing it, there's probably still a place for that in hockey. But using it as a tool to intimidate or hurt, I don't know. It's going away from that. So to a T, he explains the game, right? Like you don't see Colton Orr anymore. You don't see George Peros anymore. You don't see Fraser McLaren anymore. Like you're not going to see those types of players in the league anymore. People that were there that they knew that, like when Colton Orr stepped into Montreal, and I know everyone would remember the game, actually. I do. I believe it was opening night in Montreal a few years back. And I think Shanahan might have been the president. He might have still been in the Department of Player Safety. But I wonder if you remember it, Pat. Colton Orr fought George Peros.
Yes.
And George Peros is lying motionless on the ice in the Bell Center. That, to me, like seeing that live, was pretty scary. And I just think that it's that there, you'll never see that again. You'll never have players on NHL rosters where they know, okay, they have a fighter, and I'm literally in the lineup tonight to fight that guy, maybe twice, right? So, what do you think about it?
For me, when I first read the comments, I actually took a step back, and then I looked at some of the tweets that were coming out, and people were saying, well, it's kind of rich for Brandon Shanahan to be saying this. Has he forgotten about where he's come from or his career? And I look at it from a different perspective. When I look at Brandon Shanahan and I look at his generation of player, how many of them died prematurely due to CTE? We know more today than they did in Brandon Shanahan's peak of his career about mental health and brain injury. So when I look at, guys like Bob Probert and even some of the more contemporary guys like Wade Belak and Rick Rippon and some of the others that died prematurely because of CTE, because of depression.
Derek Boogaard.
Derek Boogaard is another.
Those had a lot to do with pain medication as well, though, right? Like overdosing of.
Because they weren't.
Well, because they weren't properly, like they weren't taken care of, right? That just doesn't have to do with CTE. That has to do with the system of doctors in the NHL not properly educating players on the medication they're taking.
But also, too, it just compounded it, right? Because I think at the time, as much as they knew that there may have been a correlation with concussion and fighting, I don't know if they knew, like, they didn't have, like, the spotter system in, or they didn't have, like, a guy is automatically gone for about a week just to kind of assess his symptoms. Or is it 2 weeks, Anthony? I know that they're if it's a suspected brain injury, they are out of the lineup for.
I think it's 10 days.
Is it 10 days?
It might be 10 days.
Right, so they're doing a lot more to kind of mitigate, because it's not even just the fighting; it's the multiple concussions. Like we had Dan Carcillo earlier on in the year, and we discussed his career and how many concussions he faced, and I think he mentioned 13 or 14 concussions over the course of his career. Like it's the compounding of the head injuries and the concussions that didn't help the situation either for a lot of these players. So when I hear Brandon Shanahan saying this, I think he's looking at it from the longevity of the game, and even too, the demographic in North America is changing. So to sell the game of hockey, you're more inclined to get an average or casual or brand new fan to hockey when you could throw out an Austin Matthews or a Connor McDavid or a Mitch Marner or, some of these,
but
so
Pat,
many
that's
other.
not. Sorry to interrupt, but so I agree with you to a sense, but I don't think using Austin Matthews as a comparable to you're going to see more Austin Matthews because those guys those are the unique case of skill players in the game. I think what you need to think of is the alignment that I would say is like a guy like Nick Patan. Okay. Now, Nick Patan is kind of like a quad A player, but you could tell that he has the skill to play in an NHL lineup. 25 years ago, Nick Patan doesn't even get a sniff in the NHL.
Yeah.
Right? A guy that is not skilled enough, is not maybe skilled enough to play in your top six, but he's also he's not going to bring you physicality in the bottom six, right? Yeah. I think paving the way for those types of players to make the league is where you see the biggest difference now. Now, if you're going down the lines of, okay, if you're trying to sell tickets, Austin Matthews has a better chance of selling tickets than Fraser McLaren and George Peros fighting that night. I agree with you 100%. Right? That yes. Demographic has changed completely. Is that what you were trying to say?
Yeah. So it's not to say that every player is going to be the upper echelon like a Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews, but I think as the game pivots to more skill, I think it opens the game up to a different audience that it doesn't have now. And when we're looking at the longevity of the game and money and revenue, the only way the NHL is ever going to get into that upper echelon of TV deals is they've got to get a bigger chunk of the American sports market. They just have to. And outside of the, the traditional hockey markets, there's still some cities and markets in the NHL right now where hockey is probably like the last page of the sports section. And it really needs to appeal to a larger demographic. Money talks. And, and another thing that was brought up in our interview with Dan Carcillo as well is the league also has a financial risk if a player gets injured because, as we're seeing now with a lot of these retired players, is now they're filing class action suits about, some of the issues that they're currently experiencing and the risk that, that they weren't necessarily communicated properly in regards to. So for me now when I watch the sport, I watch it for the entertainment, the speed, the excitement. I went back and tried to watch some of the games, on Leafs TV from back like early 2000s and in the 90s, and the game just seems so slow. All the clutching and grabbing, it lacks the flow. And for me, when I'm talking to my friends about the game, I'm talking about, did you see that highlight of Connor McDavid, or did you see that amazing pass by Mitch Marner, or did you see what Panarin did? And you know what I mean? Like my conversations have evolved. And I think that's essentially what Brendan Shanahan was trying to communicate, is that the game is evolving. And I think we need to continue down this path because it makes the game much more entertaining. And you can still have your big hits but I don't think you're going to get like your Scott Stevens or, where it's going to be that it's a huge hit. It's going to be a shoulder to a possible head. And, violence isn't necessarily the entertainment, and it's not the end goal in hockey. It's not the UFC where the more violence you inflict on the competition means that you're going to win. Violence isn't necessarily a direct impact to the final score and the determination of the game.
Yeah. So now that you mentioned that, I'm just going to jump in here. So, I also think that's on the league, to police that, right? So we got to think in the bigger picture here, and let's bring it to our last our off-season podcast since the Leafs have been knocked out of the playoffs. What have we been pressing the Leafs go out and get? Go out and get more grit. Go out and get more size, heaviness around the puck. The reason being, and again, I'm going to say it, the unfortunate reality is that the the Stanley Cup playoffs are called completely differently than the NHL regular season. The refs swallow the whistle, and that's the way it is. So until that changes, teams will tailor their rosters to be like that. Now, I'm not saying that I don't enjoy the scrums after the whistle, the competitive grit that you see on players and the anger, right? Like I've said this countless times.
I'm all for that. I'm all for that.
If I was on that ice, I am so enraged at Zdeno Chara when he plays and when he sucker punches like a guy like John Tavares in that Game 7. I was so enraged. I wanted to go and just clock him right in the mouth. Now, I'd probably need like a stepladder to get to his teeth, right? Because the guy's so big. But
a booster seat.
Yeah, the point is that you need like fans want players to care. They want players to feel the same emotion that they feel about watching the game, right? But it's kind of tailoring that emotion and matriculating it into a more effective way of competitiveness and grit.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, you need to be able to police the dirtiness and mitigate the risk of injury of these players, because nobody wants to see anybody get stretchered off, like Shanahan says. I played hockey my entire life, and I've seen people get stretchered off, and it is to be in a ice rink, no matter how many fans are in the stands, right? It's shocking, it's scary, right?
Yeah.
And it's very sad to see, because people's lives can change in an instant, and it's for stupidity, right?
Yeah.
So at the same time, I've seen the game evolve in front of my own eyes, not just as a fan, but also as a minor hockey player, right? Baseline testing for concussion changed immensely since I started playing to when I finished playing, right? So the game has taken steps to monitor and keep track of these injuries and what the possible brain damage that could be occurring in the game of hockey, right? But it's on the league to make the sport safe for kids so that parents feel comfortable putting them on skates, putting them on the ice, and having them play the game. Because that is where you start growing your game to a point where the money starts flowing in, and you're not on the back page of a newspaper in the United States. You're getting primetime coverage in all demographics of the United States, and we already know that hockey's number one in Canada.
Yes.
But we know that the demographic of Canada is changing. So that, like, if you're not evolving, you're losing, right? Someone's catching up to you, right? And we know basketball's catching up to hockey right now in Canada. So, and I think the 2026 World Cup of soccer is coming, right? So we know that that's coming. I think soccer is on the rise in this country as well. They already have a poster boy for it in Alphonso Davies. And in women's soccer, I think her Jordan Huitema, that's a girl too that has been. I think she plays for PSG, the women's team in Paris, right? So soccer and basketball have these figures now that are making kids want to start playing these sports as opposed to hockey. If you can't get your best athletes playing the game, then you're losing. So hockey needs to change in the sense that you can't. If like, to me, it makes me sick when parents, still to this day, you go into a minor hockey rink and they see a big hit. Their 12-year-old kid is playing, and a big hit happens with a 12-year-old kid, right? And the kid's laying on the ice, like, in clear pain, and you see parents clapping. Like, to me, that just it's a large, just gross pit in my stomach, just thinking of that, because that's not the way that hockey is supposed to be played. Shame on those parents that do it. Shame on the parents that promote the violence. Like, I get it, though, that people get caught up in the moment. Like, I've seen it, I've lived it, that it's easy to get caught up in the moment of the game at the time, but you got to think of the bigger picture of, like, what's best for this game. And the best thing for this game is not getting rid of hitting. I actually think kids need to learn how to do body contact earlier, but invest the NHL and the IIHF need to invest the money in programs where kids separate kids from the puck without hurting them. You understand what I'm saying?
Yep, most definitely. And for me, the way I look at it is, it's at the end of the day, We need the game. The game needs to sell itself. The speed, the skill, the goals. I personally, as an overall, once again, we at the end of the day, we both, based on our opinions, we both circle back that Brandon Shanahan's comments weren't at all controversial. I truly understand where he's coming from with those comments. I think the game just, even without those comments, it's naturally going in that direction. And I know that there's a subsection in Leafs Nation that feels like the league is stuck in this goon environment and the Leafs are the only ones getting away from it. But I think I looked at a stat back when, as I was researching for, an interview back earlier on this year, where I think even just fighting and major penalties have been down. I think fighting has been down, 65% from, pre-cap era till now. Like, the game is evolving. Brandon Shanahan is just reflecting that change. And from a Leafs perspective, I'm actually happy that the Leafs might actually be ahead of a curve of some sort, because, as you know, the Leafs were behind the curve in preparing for the salary cap, and it cost us years of pain. We always lack something in the roster, so it's kind of nice that the Leafs are pivoting, and it's kind of nice that the president and GM are on the same page on such a major philosophical decision such as this, and on the same game plan when it comes to even building out the roster.
Absolutely, yeah, I concur.
Well, thanks, Anthony, for your time today. Do you have any final thoughts?
Nope. I think we pretty much said it all. Just again, right? We're all craving for content. So when that thing came out, I think that people were eager to jump on it. But again, we got to take a look at the bigger picture here. And it's, again, right? People are gonna defend what they believe in. I just think as the game continues on, right? I think the strong opinionated people that want staged fighting into the game, those people are going to be weeded out of hockey fan bases completely, hopefully. So I think the game is on its path to changing for the better.
Most definitely. So thanks again, Anthony. And it has been a great conversation as always, and we'll be doing this again next week. Stay safe.
Yep, sounds good. Thanks, Pat.
Cheers. So welcome. We have a very special guest for season 4, episode 9. We have huge Leaf fan Benjamin Davidson and also author of the book Murphy's Boy. Welcome to the Saturday Nation podcast.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. So Benjamin, offline, you and I have been discussing some of your favorite Maple Leaf and hockey memories. Let's just start off. How did you ever become a Leaf fan, and sort of, what is like your biggest or most favorite memory?
I would say that I've been a fan ever since I've been a kid. My family are diehard Leaf fans, and I think just growing up in and around the Toronto area, you become a Leafs fan pretty quickly, and you hate Ottawa. So it's pretty easy. It's actually funny for me to see that we pick up former Ottawa Senators players like Spezza, and I look at them, and every time I see him, I'm like, I used to hate you so much, but but now he's on the team, so you gotta cheer for him, right?
Yes.
But in terms of I guess it's strange because my favorite hockey moment is actually after I was a kid, when I was working as a third party for the Leafs and the Raptors. And luckily, I got to be there for the Matt Sundin retirement ceremony.
Oh, wow.
Which was a really cool moment. And I did something right before the ceremony started, a couple hours before the ceremony started. I took one of my staff down to the ice. And I could have got in a lot of trouble for this, but I walked out to, I think I was like 2 feet from center ice, and somebody was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I was like, nothing. I got to get out of here. So I booked it pretty quickly, and luckily didn't get kicked out or fired from my job at the time.
Excellent, excellent. So another reason why we're having on, and you were mentioning, how you just wrote a book and it's just been released. What is, the book, or how did it ever start? Sort of what is the background of your book, Murphy's Boy, and sort of what's the basis of it?
So Murphy's Boy is a book that started when I was living in Spain, and it's actually quite relevant and recent. The coronavirus had hit, and I'd been watching it come out of China, and eventually it got into Spain. And I had posted this message for the first time. I had gone on Facebook and social media for 5 years, and I posted a message just kind of warning people and saying, like, look, this is real. It's pretty serious, and don't let this happen to your country. Because my wife, my partner, she's a neurologist, and she got drafted to work in a COVID unit.
Okay.
And then it became really real. But then from there it just kind of kept spiraling, because I saw so many people, I don't know, musicians working for free and just playing every day for people, or artists doing things, whatever it may be. So I started writing, and and posting a chapter of it every day for 90 days straight.
Okay.
And it was just kind of these baby steps where I didn't even know that I was writing a book, but it just kind of turned into this thing, and people started reading it. And I remember, I think it was part 4. I think it was a friend commented and said, "Oh, who knew that you could write? Wow." And I kind of chuckled to myself, and I was like, "Oh, they didn't know. They didn't know that I had this in me," because I had been writing for years, but I had never shared it with anybody. So
Yes.
it was a cool moment to be able to do that, but I wanted to tell the human side of the story of what was going on, rather than people just seeing the numbers
Yes.
that we see on the news, and let them know that there is hope, but there's also a grimness to it. And I get into some trouble. It's 100% nonfiction, so I get into some trouble a few times and find my way out of it, luckily. And then as I was writing, people were asking, like, what happened to me? Where had I been for the last 5 years? I started throwing in flashbacks of my youth and childhood, leading up to where I was hoping that it would kiss itself, that I would be able
Yes.
to end where I started. But basically what happened was, I found my ending on day 90. But so just to give you the cliff notes of my childhood, ran away from home when I was 14, uh, started living with my estranged mother, who was mentally ill, and taking care of her. Had to drop out of high school 3 separate occasions. Was homeless 3 separate times between the ages of 16 to 22. Got my GED. Ended up going to college with it, and then getting headhunted out of college, and ending up in the GTA, and eventually in Toronto. So it's a lot of that. Grew up around thugs, drugs, and criminals, and in the ghetto of sorts when I was younger. So there's some hard times that go in there, and there's moments that'll make you bust a gut. There's moments that will punch you in the gut. There's moments that'll rip your heart out. I don't hold anything back when I write it. So it's this visceral book that people seem to be enjoying, which is kind of cool. I didn't know I could do it.
No, excellent. And, you brought up some very personal moments in your life, a lot of hardship. Was there ever a moment that you kind of felt, maybe that you had to hold back, that you didn't want to share a certain story or a certain aspect of a moment of your life where, because writing this story, it clearly sounds like it was a very personal experience for you. And I know for a lot of people, the easiest way to get over that little hump is to kind of clean up the story and like and be fearful of a judgment based on from a particular reader, or how someone might perceive a certain situation that you've written about. How did you overcome that?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because a lot of people were saying it's shocking how vulnerable I would be, or the courage that I had to kind of tell these stories. And for me, I was just being honest. There was one moment, I think it was part 38, on day 38, where I almost pulled my punches. I almost pulled them. And my partner, my wife, she was like, "You're pulling back on this one." And I was like, okay, I'm going to tell this whole story. And then I think after that, I mean, I was telling the truth the whole way there, but I think it was part 39. That's where I really start dropping the hard flashbacks. And I mean, like, there's moments where I go beast mode. There's moments where I really have to pick myself up. There's heartbreaking stuff, but I kind of, by that point, I had realized that it was helping people. Yeah. And I just looked at it like, if this can make somebody feel like they can do this themselves, tell their own story, or get up, you know, and I don't know if I can say it. Can I say BS?
Yeah, no, you know, we've had worse. We've had worse.
All right. Well, so there's a moment that took place that I write about, and it's later on in the book, but where I say to myself, ain't nobody got time for bullshit, or what now bullshit. You got to get up. So yeah, it was just being real and telling people this is real life.
Yes.
There's no point in sugarcoating things. You really got to show the world who you are. And once I realized I was writing a book, I kind of started putting goals for myself. So the first goal was that I was going to pass Mark Twain's Tom Sawyer, which was 77,000 words.
Yes.
And then the next one was Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities, which is 137,000 words. And then, so that was bronze and silver. And then the one after that was Moby Dick, which is 207,000 words. And I didn't know that I was going to be able to hit any of them because,
yes,
like I said, I didn't know I was writing a book. But by the time I found my ending, I think it ends somewhere around 287,000 words.
Okay.
So I smoked Melville. And I was impressed with myself with that because I didn't know for the longest time until actually after I had published the book, a friend looked up how long it took him to write Moby Dick, and it took 18 months. And I was like, oh, I did that 1.5 in 90 days. So I got hot, man. I just started cooking those words, and it's an easy read to get into.
Yes.
It's shorter chapters, but then it really starts picking up the later that you go on, and it's longer chapters, and there's a lot of punch to it. There's funny moments and crazy times that take place.
You mentioned that, you know, as you've started, you know, now that your book's out, that it's starting to help others. How did this process possibly heal maybe any, past hurts or pains? Like, did you find that it was therapeutic for yourself as you were writing? Like, were you finding that now you're going through your own healing process as you were helping others?
Very much so. Very much so. It's strange. There's moments where I can read parts of it, and it's almost like I'm reading somebody else's story.
Yes.
And it's kind of like you just poured that stuff out of you. And I told it in such a visceral way that I got it off my own chest. There's also moments where I read the beginning and I'm like, wow, I can see this guy coming back to life. Because I was a ghost. You couldn't find me even if you tried. And more often than not, I wouldn't reply. So
it's kind of funny when because we as humans, as different as we are, we do have a lot of these commonalities in our life's journey. Like, I was, stricken with cancer 6 years ago, had it twice within like a 6-month period. And it's funny. I am a different person today than I was pre-cancer. Like, this blog, this interview, this podcast would never have happened if I had never been sick, and it's given me a different perspective on life. And you mentioned, like, when I go back and read some of my Facebook posts when I was, sharing with my family and friends my experience and, the scary times, and I call them my holy shit moments where, I had healed physically, but not mentally. And there I was on the TTC subway crying for no reason because it was like, holy shit, I just came out of cancer moment. And there was no rhyme or reason when they would come. It would just come. So finding that healing and looking back at some of my own writing, it's like, shit, man, like I came out of something really crazy and look what's come out of it, you know? So, you know, I definitely see that similar experience with yourself.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. And that's the thing. It's, I tell people that it's kind of like an evolution.
Yes.
And I'm sure you feel the same way, that you evolve into this new person. And sure, there's still facets of who you were, and you can still understand different pieces of how you used to feel about things. But you look at the world in such a different way because it changes you. And especially something like going through cancer. I mean, that is heart-wrenching, man. Like that's, and so to be able to pull yourself up from that a couple times, not just once, and then it makes sense. But the thing is, you have to give everything you've got inside you to be able to do that, right? So I kind of look at it like, you know, when there's a guy that won the Stanley Cup or a guy that lost in the Stanley Cup finals and you see him crying, right?
Yes.
Well, to me, I look at those guys and I say those are the strongest people that you can know.
Yeah.
Because they gave everything that they had, and then they got to this moment, whether they won or lost, they still won because they knew inside that they gave everything they had, right? So that's why it rips someone's heart out when they don't get the trophy, or it likewise when they do.
Yes. Yeah.
It's because it's that reward.
No, most definitely. So, you know, as we wrap up this interview, you know, do you want to let our listeners know where they can find your book, how they can interact with you?
Sure.
You know, maybe, you know, let our listeners know, you know, where they can find you on social media and some of your handles. Because I really do think that our audience will get a lot interacting with you. I know I have over the last couple of weeks of interacting with you. And I really do think that, you know, your story can have a positive impact given everything that everyone's been going through in 2020.
Right. So they can find the book on Amazon if they just type Murphy's Boy by B.A. Davidson. It's a black and white cover. It's a deserted highway, so it's easy to find that way. They can also find it as an ebook with Kobo or Chapters Indigo. They can also download it off of Amazon for Kindle. Where they can find me is there's a Facebook page called Murphy's Boy 2020. There's also, they can find me on Instagram. Those are basically my two major platforms. And that's Murphy's_boy. And actually on that one, it's kind of cool because I've been hustling this book because it's something that once you realize that you're good at something, you want it more than you want air.
Yes.
So I've been doing things like I've been going out and doing a Murphy's Boy book tour where just taking pictures around the city with people holding the book and chatting with people, which is kind of cool. Putting up different little quotes that I take from the book, which are kind of neat and funny and they'll touch people. But then on top of that, what I've been doing recently is I've actually been narrating my own work, which is kind of cool in so many senses because I didn't know that I could do this. So it's funny. I was talking to a friend the other day and they're like, you're so hyped up about the fact that you just like put out this narration and you're listening to it over and over again. And I'm like, well, hold on a second. You don't realize that every time I do something, this is like found money.
Yes.
I didn't know I could do this. And I had a friend that contacted me the other day and we used to play ball hockey together, and he actually said to me, I bought your book and I finished it two nights ago. I wanted to surprise you. And I was like, what? You bought my book, first of all, but you actually read it? And he's like, yeah, I bought it to support you, but then I started reading it. And I was like, man, you can write. Like, this is good.
Yes.
It's like a textbook, man. Like, I'll show like this thing is huge because I couldn't make a smaller size on Amazon. It was bigger than their page count. So it's a beast, but it's a good Christmas gift if somebody wants to pick it up. it'll keep you occupied, and especially during COVID, it'll make you feel all kinds of different emotions. So it's worth every letter.
You know what? This has been a pleasure, Benjamin. Thank you for giving us your time and sharing your story, your book. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap up this interview?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. This has been absolutely awesome. Second, for the listeners, go easy on the Leafs. Just remember for a second. You gotta look at the Leafs not like we're Stanley Cup champions. You gotta look at them like we're an underdog story. We are a comeback story waiting to happen. And those are the type of stories that I like. I mean, a success story that I like is not a guy that's successful, but a guy that messes his life up and becomes successful after that, right? So
yes,
you got to look at the Leafs kind of like that. We had our glory moments, God knows how long ago, but yes. And we've had little blips,
little spurts of success. I know, and then there's the lost Ballard eras, and none of us want to talk about. But
well, I mean, just a funny side note, anecdote is I almost broke up with a girl one time because she told me that she was a Boston fan.
Oh, geez.
I mean, I think that if my name wasn't Ben, I would like the letter B. Like, I can't stand them. I can't stop knocking us out of the playoffs, and now it's the Blue Jackets. Jesus. So yeah, you can't win.
We can't win as Leaf fans, but hopefully this upcoming year will give us some some more positive things to share and to discuss and to ride with this franchise that likes to repaint on its followers.
Hey man, Jumbo Joe.
Hey, Jumbo Joe.
He's going to be our savior. He's going to be our savior. I mean,
I'm hoping, you know what, if you do, like, I have a big thing, like we had Brock McGillis on, and we discussed, the Leafs correcting some of their ghosts that have, when we think about the Ballard curse. And the one thing that he pointed out is if you have enough moral victories, the atmosphere around the organization changes. And the big thing was, repairing the relationship with Dave Keon, bringing in these vets and celebrating them, because that was something that the Leafs did very poorly, in doing in past. So it's kind of nice to see them rectify some of the wrongs. And here's hoping that if, they do enough unleafy things, that something unleafy like winning a cup will come, right? So
look, if it's going to happen, I got a feeling this could be the year. This could be, I know we say that every year, but this year, it's going to be different. Fans look at them like an underdog story. We are a comeback story. And as soon as we get behind that type of story, anything can happen.
Anything can. Well, thanks so much for your positivity. Thank you so much. And, we hope to have you on again very shortly.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Cheers.